Good morning and welcome. I do appreciate members of the media who are covering this event this morning. I know there's a lot going on in the Capitol today, and I appreciate the time you've invested in this press conference, and I want to jump right in and get us going. My name is Stephen Bloom. I am the state representative from Cumberland County, the 199th District, and today I'm announcing the introduction of my Bridge Safety Emergency First Initiative, House Bill 1717, with 26 co-sponsors. If the condition of our bridges in Pennsylvania is so dire that we have to barricade or restrict 1,000 of them, and I believe our extremely knowledgeable Secretary of Transportation when he says it really is that bad, then let's act like it. Let's move heaven and earth to fix those bridges immediately. When we get to a crisis point like we've reached now, where fire trucks and emergency responders are forced to waste precious minutes detouring around posted bridges, when those wasted minutes could mean lives lost, let's stop waiting and hoping and dreaming for some grand pie-in-the-sky, tax-fueled transportation funding fantasy, and let's fix those bridges. The bridge safety emergency in Pennsylvania is real. But it's an emergency we can realistically fix with the nearly $7 billion in taxpayer money that we already spend each year on transportation. The situation is urgent, lives are hanging in the balance, and it's time to make the responsible decision to reprioritize our spending. It's time to stop spending hard-earned taxpayer money on the nice-to-haves when the must-haves are falling apart. Under my new bill, anytime a structurally deficient bridge is posted as closed or weight restricted, that bridge will automatically move to the front of PennDOT's project line for immediate rebuilding and repair, shifting the way we spend the tax dollars we already collect. In Cumberland County, there are 9 state bridges on the new posting list. PennDOT says it would cost just over $9 million to fix them all. But last year, PennDOT sent almost $8 million to Amtrak in Washington, D.C. for National Railroad passengers. And that's just one of the many less urgent ways that PennDOT is spending tens of millions of transportation dollars. We've all heard dramatic statements in the transportation funding debate about the high cost of doing nothing. But there's also a high cost of doing everything, or at least trying to do everything, in an all-or-nothing tax and spend funding push, and meanwhile, we're letting bridges crumble. Fixing our bridges shouldn't have to wait for an all-or-nothing transportation bill. Let's be reasonable. Let's be responsible. It's a public safety emergency. Let's reallocate our priorities, and let's fix our bridges first. Joining me on the stage today are Nathan Benefield from the Commonwealth Foundation and Anna McCausland from Americans for Prosperity, Pennsylvania, and each of them are going to present some information to you, and then I'll open the floor for any questions and answers. Thank you. And Nathan, if you want to step up.
Thank you, Representative Bloom. My name is Nate Benefield. I'm the Director of Policy Analysis with the Commonwealth Foundation. Everyone on the stage agrees that transportation funding is a core part of our of government, and that we have bridges that are desperately in need of repair. In our view, and I think everyone's view here, is that we need to prioritize that spending. Fixing the bridges that are about to come down should be a top priority for state government, and that Representative Bloom bill goes a great first step in making that the priority for where we spend our transportation dollars, rather than other things that shouldn't be prioritized. Pennsylvania already spends $7 billion on transportation. We have one of the highest gas taxes in the country already, ranked 15th in the nation in terms of our gas tax. And we already spend about $71,000 per road mile based on the latest federal data. That ranks us 11th highest in road spending per mile in the country. So we already have a lot of money there. But the question is, how are we spending it? Are we spending it well or not? Representative Bloom's bill would say bridges that are being waitlisted would become priorities. And we agree with that. That should be priority. That's where we should be spending tax dollars. Those are things that we need to fix and should be doing. There are other things that should not be prioritized. For instance, prevailing wage mandates that we have on transportation. We're requiring state and local government to spend more than they otherwise would. That prevents bridges and roads from being fixed. It's money just being wasted. That if we really want to fix these bridges before they come down, we need to get rid of some of those prevailing wage mandates. So we shouldn't be sending drivers money, whether that be turnpike tolls, as we're doing now, or fees as being proposed to mass transit. Drivers should pay for the cost of the roads they're using. We shouldn't, low-income residents in Forest County shouldn't be paying higher tolls or higher taxes to pay for subsidized billionaires to ride SEPTA down the main line. We also need to prioritize everything within the state budget. Transportation really should be one of our priorities. It is a core function of government. Fixing the bridges we already have needs to be done. There are other things we shouldn't be spending money on. We shouldn't be borrowing money for corporate welfare projects. We shouldn't be borrowing money for the Arlen Specter Library. We should be borrowing money to fix our bridges and get that done first. We shouldn't be subsidizing, as the Department of Environment Protection has a program to give vouchers for electric cars. Actually, one of the reasons people say we need more money for roads and bridges is because cars are more fuel efficient, yet at the same time we're using tax dollars to pay people to buy more fuel efficient cars. That doesn't make sense. We need to prioritize spending first. That's the first step to fixing our transportation crisis, and Representative Bloom's bill is a great first step for prioritizing where we need to be spending those dollars and making sure that our bridges are getting fixed in a timely manner.
Thank you, Representative Bloom, for inviting me to speak today. My name is Anna McCausland. I'm the Director of Policy for Americans for Prosperity Pennsylvania. AFP is a national organization of over 2 million grassroots members, 117,000 which live in the Commonwealth. First, I want to talk about common sense. Thank you, Representative Bloom, for interjecting common sense in the transportation discussion. There's a poster right here beside me that shows the need to have and the like to haves. We need to have good roads and structurally sound bridges. Bike lanes are nice to have. Sooner or later, bicyclists will need to cross a bridge that could now or in the foreseeable future be closed. Bike lanes are not a pressing priority for the millions of people, millions of families in Pennsylvania who travel our roads and bridges every day. Safety comes first. Again, thank you, Representative Bloom, for introducing House Bill 1717 that prioritizes current tax dollars to fix what's necessary instead of what is nice, without raising a dime more of those tax dollars to do it. Families in the Commonwealth know what it's like to make a budget and stick to a budget and not just pass one. Because families are dealing with these tight budgets, they're not an endless resource for increasing taxes, for bike lanes or other extraneous expenditures. They want to be safe on the roads and bridges that carry them to their children's daycare or school, that take them to work, that take them home, soccer games, and the endless stops in between. They also need their state government to prioritize and utilize their tax dollars for the essentials first. Taxpayers will pay their fair share for roads and bridges because it's a core function of government. However, they're sending over $6 billion every year to the state government for this core function, and as Nate said, it's the 11th highest in the country for dollars going towards transportation funding, roads and bridges, per mile, I think you said. 11th highest per mile. And while it's never acceptable to raise taxes, doing so during these difficult economic times is simply unthinkable. Ask yourself, what is there that we can do, including this bill, reforms that can be made to cut the cost of building and maintenance? Prevailing wage reform comes to mind, one of the many reforms that can be made that will save taxpayer dollars. If you don't know, prevailing wage is this misnomer that describes the increased wages and benefits workers receive for working on state projects involving more than $25,000 of state funding. Representative Bloom has been touring the Commonwealth as a member of the House Labor and Industry Committee, hearing testimony on this subject. Projects involving prevailing wage cost 20% more than a similar project involving just private dollars. In some cases, that increased price tag is cost prohibitive and it cancels the project altogether. Before any politician considers raising taxes on working families for transportation, they must fully repeal prevailing wage and enact House Bill 1717. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Nate. And I'd be happy to take some questions at this time. Jeff?
Have you discussed your proposal either with Secretary Shoak or with Chairman Hess of the Transportation Committee?
I have discussed it on kind of a preliminary basis with Secretary Shoak. He obviously doesn't accept the proposal as I've set it forth. He's talked about some possible difficulties in it, projects with federal funding tie-ins that have certain restrictions, and I certainly would be open to a process of friendly amendments if we move forward with this, as we can negotiate some common sense amendments to make sure we're keeping the proposal as it's drafted now in compliance with any federal issues that come with the federal funding that sometimes is attached to projects. The key, though, is to make sure that we don't go back to the Pennsylvania taxpayers and ask them for more money at a time when we simply need to prioritize the resources that we already have collected from the taxpayers. Jan?
That clearly was Secretary Shouk's idea of reprioritizing the spending they have now and closing or restricting the weights on these 1,000 bridges. So you're not, I mean, because he's saying that way money's available to fix the more heavily traveled, you know, interstate bridges and that kind of thing. You're not buying that rationale?
I'm simply concerned that if we've gotten to the point where we actually have to close these bridges because they're failing structurally, which means that fire apparatus and other emergency responders can't use those bridges to reach people who may be in need, then something is amiss, and we need to reprioritize the way we're spending the dollars, take those dollars from less urgent, less pressing, less emergency-related projects, and move them over to fix these bridges. In Cumberland County, as I mentioned, there are 9 state bridges on that list, and the average cost to fix those bridges is about $1 million apiece. Many of the bridges throughout Cumberland County, and I've studied Cumberland more than I have other counties, are even less expensive to fix. There's many that are under $500,000 to fix, to bring them back up to modern standards or completely replace them. So we can do a lot with a fairly small amount of money if we make the decision that, yes, this is a priority. We need to decide now to take care of this immediate issue, deal with the big picture of where we go in the future in transportation as that materializes over the upcoming years. But right now, let's focus on getting these bridges reopened so we don't have the specter of firemen and other first responders trying to get to the scene of an emergency and they can't get there because they're delayed by a closed bridge. John?
Speaking of amendments, Senate Bill 1 is on the House voting schedule. Are you planning on introducing this initiative as an amendment on the floor?
Actually, that's an interesting strategic question. I have not yet crossed that bridge, to use an apt analogy. Certainly something I'll think about as things materialize. I don't know, because we're just coming back into the fall session. I'm not sure what the legislative timetable will be for bringing that bill back before us in the House, if at all.
Do you have any sense of where your caucus is at on the bill that passed the Transportation Committee last June? That was, at the very end there. Things have changed with that, or?
Well, it's obviously a contentious issue, and there's been a number of stories even over the summer about some of the arguments within our caucus on that issue. I've got 26 co-sponsors on this bill, and I wouldn't say this bill is mutually exclusive from a member's support of the overall transportation funding package that's been talked about. But I think it's fair to say that the idea behind this bill is let's get this resolved first, and then we can discuss transportation at some future point. This is to fix the present emergency we're facing.
Is there any provision in your legislation for, let's say it becomes the law of the land, if some transportation emergency with, for example, a highway, not a bridge, occurs, will that tie the department's hands from taking some of that bridge money to solve a road problem that may arise out of a natural disaster or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, certainly if there's any legal issue with something along those lines, I'm open to making sure that my bill covers all emergency type situations. And that's really the spirit in which I offer it. I think about, for example, what happened up on Route 81 just north of Harrisburg over the summer, where there was a terrible wreck and a very important bridge was damaged beyond use. Resources were mobilized incredibly quickly. The Department of Transportation and others in the administration moved very swiftly to make sure that bridge was being worked on literally within days and weeks following the event. And I've driven by there just the other day. I see that it's making substantial progress. It appears that they've got some of the main new girders in place. They've got steel moving, concrete being poured, all those things. That's the spirit in which I think we can function in this state when we look at these emergency situations we're facing with bridges that are now literally being closed or restricted. We should act the same way. These are important priorities. Let's get that taken care of, and then we can sort out the other priorities down the road. And the poster that I have here, I'm not here to attack these other things on the not that side of my poster. But to me, we need to focus on where our top priorities need to be. Part of government's job is to allocate the scarce resources that we have, and these are taxpayer-funded resources. So we often have to choose the must-haves over the nice-to-haves, and that's the spirit in which I offer the bill. We need to focus on what's most important right now, take care of that, make sure nobody is at risk. John?
Would you say you're absolutely opposed to increasing the gas tax? And if so, how many other, do you feel like other 20 other guys in the House like that?
Again, I'm hesitant to speak for anyone else. I'm opposed to increasing the gas tax. I feel like we have enough resources we're already collecting in the government from the taxpayers that we should be able to do the job with the dollars we have. I know that there were 20-some of us who stood in this same room in late June and said we were opposing any increase in the gas tax. I know many of those individuals are now co-sponsors of House Bill 1717, but I would hate to speak specifically for any of them individually.
You brought up the 81 bridge, and that's, I sort of wondered, since, PennDOT was very quick to direct resources to that, is it necessary to have legislation to tell them, hey, when an emergency comes up, direct money to that problem to solve that
I
problem?
mean, to me, Jan, it is, because obviously if we've gotten to the point where these bridges are on a list where they're being closed, something's drastically wrong. To me, we should get those bridges fixed, and if we have to drive over a rougher road or cut back on some transportation routes on mass transit or whatever else it is that doesn't put lives at risk, let's do those things first. I mean, I looked at, using the PennWatch site, you can go down through and look at 2012-13 transportation funding that things that PennDOT has spent tax dollars on. I'm seeing $7 million plus for airport development, tens of millions to for-profit railroads for transportation assistance projects, a lot of building and improvement projects on PennDOT buildings, not roads, but buildings, red light photo enforcement, freight rail assistance, those kind of things. Well, again, they may be very important, but if we could use any of those dollars right now to get these bridges back open, I think we should do that first and then go back to sorting out the other priorities. All right, I thank you very much again for being here, and I'll be available for questions afterwards personally.